Hi, I'm Estelle. My sister-in-law says I changed after I built a fence. But the truth is, she never liked me having lines she couldn't cross. She used to walk through our yard like it was hers. No knock, no question, just entitlement disguised as family. When I finally said no, when I dared to claim a piece of land with my name on it, she called it betrayal. Then came the whispers, the fake inspector, the group chat where they talked about me like I was some problem they had to fix. They made me invisible until I stopped asking to be seen. But here's what no one talks about. What happens when the nice one draws a line and the whole family turns cold? Want to know what she did when I told her to stay off my property? You might think I'm exaggerating, but I promise, I'm not. Want to hear how it ends? They say when you finally get your own house, it changes you. I thought that meant fresh paint and hanging curtains. Turns out, it meant learning who people really are. And when Darian and I bought the corner lot in Evanston, it felt like a new chapter. Quiet street, the kind of neighbors who wave but don't pry, and just enough yard to make it feel like something was ours. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. After all the years saving, fixing credit, dodging layoffs, and putting things on hold so others could go first, it was finally our time. The place had good bones, but the fencing line along the side, overgrown, broken, practically non-existent. That side of the property butted right up against my brother's house. Well, technically, his wife Vera's house now. The lawn was blended so awkwardly you could walk from one porch to the other and not notice you'd crossed two properties. And Vera liked it that way. She'd always cut through, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with the recycling, one time with a glass of wine like she was strolling through her own vineyard. No knock, no heads up. Just that self-satisfied smile she wore like, "Oh, relax, it's just me." It started again the week we moved in. I was pulling weeds from the side flower bed when she passed right behind me, humming, holding her compost bucket like this was some shared garden. She didn't even flinch, just said, "Glad someone's finally cleaning this up." That tone of hers, equal parts compliment and condemnation. I didn't say anything that day, or the next, when she and her friend Rhonda walked through again, chattering loud enough for me to hear, well, at least someone took that mess off their hands. I let it slide, the way I always had. Back when I lived in that very guest room she once offered, after Dad died, after college, after I was too broke to afford my own space, Vera ruled that house. My brother worked long shifts, and Vera ran things like it was her queendom. Family dinners, birthdays, even holidays. Vera decided when and where. And somehow, even though I was the one vacuuming, driving people to appointments, watching her daughter Lyra after school, I was just lucky to be taken in. She always made it sound like I owed her for breathing. That's probably why I hesitated so long about the fence. But Darian didn't. "We need it," he said plainly, reading the police report after the third time someone had wandered through the alley and around to our porch. Not just for us, for safety, for peace. I nodded, quietly thankful he said it first. We filed the permit, paid the surveyor, staked the line, not a single inch beyond what was ours. But of course, the moment Vera saw the little orange flags, she appeared. "Y'all building a fence?" Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. I straightened up, dusted my hands, and said, "Just something simple. We'd feel safer." She didn't say another word, just blinked, smiled flatly, and walked off through our yard. Again. The contractor came 3 weeks later. It was a warm Saturday morning. Darian stayed outside with the crew while I prepped coffee inside. I heard voices, sharp ones. I stepped onto the porch just in time to see Vera wagging her finger at the workers. "You can't do this. That's community access. It's been open for years." Darian stood with the blueprint in hand, calm but firm. "This is our lot, Vera. We're within bounds. We've got permits." "You didn't ask," she snapped, turning to me as if I'd stolen something. I stepped forward slowly. "Vera, it's not about you. It's about safety, ours. We just want a little privacy." She turned on her heel, muttering, "Well, don't come crying when the neighbors start asking questions." By late afternoon, the posts were up. I stood back, watching the skeleton of what would soon be our barrier. I wasn't thrilled about the visual shift, but something inside me settled. Until my phone pinged. Family group chat. Vera had posted a photo of the fence with the caption, "When family forgets what togetherness means, they build fences instead of bridges." Henrietta, my mother-in-law, liked it. Darian's sister heart reacted. My brother said nothing, neither did Darian. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. The picture, our fence half finished, had already gathered comments. One cousin added, "Oof, things must be rough over there." Someone else posted a laughing emoji. I typed, then deleted, typed again. Nothing sounded right, because truth doesn't always sound like defense. Sometimes it just sounds like silence. Darian came in, wiping his hands. "What's up?" I showed him the post. He read it and sighed, handing the phone back. "Ignore it. It's just Vera being Vera." I didn't answer, just nodded. That night, after dinner, I scrolled again. Nothing new in the group chat, just the echo of what was already said. And what wasn't. No one stood up for me. No one asked me what happened. No one questioned why we'd even need a fence in the first place. I whispered into the quiet of my kitchen. I followed the rules. Why do I feel like I'm being punished? The dishwasher hummed, indifferent. I turned off the light, staring one last time out the kitchen window toward the posts standing stiff in the dirt. They weren't up to keep people out. They were up because no one ever kept others out. For me. And yet, when I tried to protect what was mine, I was told I was tearing the family apart. It was early Sunday morning when I stepped outside to water the new lavender bush along the fence line. The scent of fresh-cut grass from Vera's yard drifted over, strong and sharp, and just like that, I was back in that tiny guest room, back when I was 24 and broke and lost, and she had offered me a place to stay with a tone that suggested I should kiss her ring in gratitude. I remember the box of clothes she left at the door my first night there, mostly outdated skirts, worn cardigans, a couple of shoes with the heels worn down. "Take what you need," she'd said sweetly. Then a week later at dinner, she said loud enough for the entire table to hear, "She's lucky we took her in, bless her heart. I even gave her half my closet." Everyone laughed, even me. But it had landed like a slap. That same morning, I stood holding the hose. I heard her screen door creak open. I didn't look, but I knew it was her. That gentle humming, like she didn't have a care in the world, was always her soundtrack when she was up to something. I stayed quiet, finished watering the lavender, turned back toward the porch, and that's when she said it. "I still think the fence is a little dramatic," she called out, not bothering to mask the judgment in her voice. I paused, slowly turned. "It's a fence, Vera, not a wall." She tilted her head. "You know what I mean. It sends a message." I didn't reply. I didn't owe her an explanation, but I should have known better. Vera doesn't need an answer to keep talking. It just feels cold. That's all. We're family. I thought we didn't need barriers. I let the silence speak for me. She walked back inside, her humming trailing behind like a perfume I didn't ask for. That afternoon, I sat in the sunroom sorting old boxes when a memory came back like a freight train. Thanksgiving, 8 years ago. I'd spent the entire morning basting a turkey no one thanked me for. I served drinks, cleared dishes, even drove Uncle Pete home because no one else would. And at the end of the night, Vera raised a glass and toasted to the women of the family, herself, her sister-in-law, and even her teenage niece. My name didn't leave her lips. Instead, she smiled in my direction and added, "And of course, Estelle's always so helpful. She's like staff, honestly." The room had laughed again. Back in the sunroom, I placed the box down and whispered, "Like staff." It wasn't just what she said, it was how easily the room agreed. The next day, she caught me as I was getting the mail. Darian had just pulled out of the driveway. She waited until I was alone. "You should really take the fence down," she said casually, like we were discussing tomato plants. "I'm not taking it down," I replied calmly. "It's just, it feels rude," she continued. "I mean, it's family land. You used to be so sweet." There it was, that word, used to. I looked at her squarely. "It's not rude to want privacy, Vera. It's property. Mine. Her expression hardened just for a second, then came the laugh, short, forced. Wow. Guess living in that house changed you. No, I said, stepping closer. What changed me is realizing that the only one who's ever had to apologize for drawing a line is me. That night, Darian was quiet, too quiet. He made dinner, set the table, asked me about my day. But he never asked about her, about what she said, about how I felt. We sat on the couch afterward. The TV was on, but neither of us watched it. I reached for the remote and paused the screen. Do you think I'm being unreasonable? I asked. He rubbed his hands together, avoiding my gaze. I think maybe it's gotten out of hand. What has? This whole fence thing, it's dividing everyone. Your brother's not speaking to me. Mom's upset. I leaned back. So, I'm the problem. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He looked at me then, really looked. Estelle, this isn't you. You used to let things go. And there it was again. Used to. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking slightly. I stared at the sink, at the stack of plates I had washed the night before, at the home I had made from scratch, and I felt like I had been erased. Later that night, I heard Vera's voice coming through Darian's phone in the living room. He had put her on speaker while he sliced fruit. She's being difficult again, she said. Maybe Estelle's not built for family life. I don't know. She's always been a little sensitive. Darian didn't correct her, didn't say a word in my defense. I stepped out onto the porch before I could hear another word. The air was heavy, thick with the kind of humidity that made your skin itch. I stood in the dark, arms crossed, eyes on the fence. This wasn't about wood, or property lines, or permits. It was about permission. They had always expected me to go along, to be grateful, to smile while being stepped on. The second I stopped playing nice, I became a problem. Difficult, cold, ungrateful, but I wasn't rebelling. I was remembering how many times I'd swallowed my voice just to be let in, but once you've tasted what it's like to protect yourself, silence starts to taste like betrayal. It was a few days after the dinner conversation with Darian, and I was doing what I usually did when I needed to center myself, pruning the roses near the back gate. There was comfort in the rhythm. Snip, pull, toss, snip, pull, toss. But even with the clippers in my hand, I couldn't stop thinking about how easily people rewrote stories when it made them look better. I heard my phone buzz on the porch and walked back inside, wiping my hands on my jeans. I expected a reminder from work or maybe a check-in from my friend Monica. Instead, my lock screen lit up with 7 missed notifications, comments, tags, reactions. Then I saw it. A screenshot of my backyard, specifically the new fence, had been posted in the Evanston Neighbors Facebook group. The caption read, "Some people forget what community means." Vera didn't tag me directly, but she didn't have to. My backyard, my home, was plastered right there for every neighbor to dissect. Within minutes, I was scrolling through comments, some subtle digs, others more brazen. Looks like someone's not a team player. Privacy is one thing, but that's just passive-aggressive. Is she even from here? I clicked on the profile of the last commenter. I'd served her lemonade at last summer's block party. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I knew better than to jump into an online firefight. Still, something burned under my skin, not just the post itself, but the silence from people who knew better. Where were the ones who'd watched Vera cut through our lawn for years? Where was that neighbor who told me last month that she'd put up cameras because strangers were snooping in her recycling bins? Nowhere. Quiet. It wasn't just a fence. It was a line they didn't want me drawing. Later that day, I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when Darian came in, holding his phone like it had bitten him. "Did you see this?" he asked. I nodded. "She posted it like it's gospel," he muttered, swiping at his screen. "This is ridiculous." "And yet no one's correcting her," I replied. He hesitated. "You want me to say something?" I stared into my mug. "No. If you have to be asked, it doesn't count." That night, I didn't sleep well. My mind kept bouncing between fury and disbelief. So the next morning, I pulled out the folder we'd made when we filed for the fence permit, every survey, email, and stamped approval. I snapped a photo of the permit, uploaded it to the same Facebook group, and posted it with a simple caption. For those curious, this is the permit we received, approved, filed, and verified. I've been quiet out of respect. But respect should go both ways. I didn't insult Vera, didn't even mention her name. But I saw a few likes trickle in, then a few private messages. Didn't know the story, thanks for sharing. I'm so sorry people were piling on you. That wasn't right. But nothing from Vera. No response, no post, no call. Just silence, cold and calculated. 3 days passed. On the 4th, I was in the kitchen making lunch when I noticed a white sedan parked crooked near the curb. A man in khakis and a short-sleeve button-down stepped out, clipboard in hand. He walked straight toward our house. He didn't knock. Just began circling the property line like he was hunting for buried treasure. I opened the screen door and stepped out. Can I help you? He barely looked up. Yeah, city inspection. Got a report about possible code violations on the perimeter. I narrowed my eyes. Do you have ID? He flashed something quickly, too quickly, and turned back to the fence. This is just preliminary. You may be in violation of height restrictions. I followed him down the side of the house. We filed the paperwork. The permit is valid. He gave a shrug, made a mark on his clipboard. Just checking. But something felt wrong. He wasn't measuring anything, just scribbling. And then I saw it. Vera, watering her front plants, casually glancing over every few seconds. Too casual. When the man rounded the back and tried to look over the fence without asking, I pulled out my phone. This is my private property. Unless you have a formal inspection order and proper identification, I'm going to need you to leave. He waved me off. No need to get all worked up, ma'am. We're just trying to help the neighborhood. Then start by knocking on the door next time. I recorded the entire exchange. His refusal to identify himself, his lack of measurements, the vague language. After he left, I sat on the porch and stared at the footage. It wasn't dramatic, nothing loud or threatening, but it was clear. Someone was trying to scare me, and I had a pretty good idea who filed the report. That evening, I uploaded the video to the same neighborhood group. No commentary, just facts. I captioned it. Being quiet has never protected me, but maybe facts will. The response was slow, but steady. Some comments vanished. Some neighbors quietly messaged me their support. Others apologized for jumping to conclusions. Still nothing from Vera. But I didn't need her to respond. She'd already said plenty, through the mouths of others, through posts, through silence. And I had learned something about silence. It makes room for lies. But now that truth was beginning to rise, so were the efforts to bury it again. If no one was going to protect me, then I would have to stop asking for permission to protect myself. Henrietta's birthday dinner came faster than I'd hoped. It had only been a week since Vera's post went up and the inspection incident that followed. Tensions hadn't eased, but no one acknowledged anything. Not the Facebook post, not the man with the clipboard, not the strained air at family gatherings. Everything was as it always had been, on the surface. We arrived at Vera's house early because, as expected, I was asked to help set the table and prep appetizers. The invitation was worded politely, but the subtext was always the same. Estelle, do the labor, stay in your place, and smile while doing it. Darian parked in front of the house, and before I could unbuckle, he turned to me. Let's just keep it simple tonight, all right? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at him and said, You mean quiet? He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just not tonight, Estelle. Please. Inside, everything smelled like pot roast and furniture polish. Vera had candles lit, a floral tablecloth on the long oak table, and a playlist of light jazz humming in the background. She greeted us like nothing had ever happened, kissed Darian's cheek, gave me a tight-lipped smile, and pointed toward the salad bowls like I worked there. I moved around the kitchen, washing my hands, slicing cucumbers, tossing lettuce into bowls, all while Vera flitted around the room, directing others, making loud jokes, commanding attention. That's always been her gift, making a space hers. By the time the rest of the family arrived, I was already tired. Dinner began with the usual clatter of plates and clinking of glasses. Darian poured wine. Henrietta beamed across the table. Vera stood at the head of it all and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I just want to take a moment," she said, smiling wide, "to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate this beautiful woman, my second mother, my rock." Henrietta waved her hand, feigning humility. Everyone murmured in agreement. Vera continued, "I also want to thank those who always step up for this family. You know who you are, people who show up, who help without being asked, who support no matter what." She turned her gaze toward her sister-in-law, Mindy. "Mindy, you drove Mom to her doctor's appointments for a whole month after her hip surgery. Thank you. And Michael, you fixed the gate last fall when no one else could." Names floated around like blessings. Not mine. I wasn't even a ghost in the speech. I was non-existent. When Vera was finished, everyone raised a glass. I smiled faintly, picked up my wine and sipped. The rest of dinner blurred. I laughed when I was supposed to. I passed the butter. I nodded in the right places. But when dessert was served and someone asked for more whipped cream, I excused myself to the kitchen. The moment I closed the door behind me, the chatter became muffled. I stood at the sink, ran water, and began washing dishes, not because anyone asked, but because the rhythm gave me something to hold on to. No one followed me. No one noticed. I finished the plates, dried my hands, and leaned against the counter. For a second, I stared at the window above the sink. You could see the backyards from there, ours included. The fence stood tall, solid, proof that I existed, that I no longer had to earn my place with service. When we got home later that evening, Darian was quiet, too quiet. We both got ready for bed in silence, the air between us thick. I sat at the edge of the bed, brushing my hair slowly. He lay back against the headboard, scrolling on his phone. I asked him softly, "Do you think I was wrong for building the fence?" He lowered his phone. "I think maybe it could have been handled differently." I turned to face him. "Handled differently? How?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Maybe talk to Vera more directly. Get her on board instead of making her feel excluded." I blinked. "So you think Vera's right?" He didn't answer, not with words. But silence is its own kind of answer. I stood up, crossed the room, and grabbed a spare pillow from the linen closet. Darian looked up, surprised. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," I said simply. "Estelle?" "No, it's fine, really." I walked down the hall and pushed open the door to the room I hadn't stepped foot in since we moved out of his mother's house. Same beige walls, same floral curtains, same feeling like I didn't quite belong. This was the room I'd stayed in after college. When Vera and my brother let me move in for a few months, that turned into over a year. I used to lay awake at night back then, hearing them laugh downstairs, always wondering when I'd be allowed to be part of things, instead of just nearby. Now, here I was again, older, married, still circling the edges of a family that only knew how to take and rarely how to see. I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't the fence that divided us. It was everything unspoken. The assumptions, the expectations, the stories they told about me in my absence, the silence they used as cover. And the longer I let them talk over me, around me, about me, the more I disappeared. So that night, in the dark, in the same room I'd once quietly disappeared into, I made a decision. If no one was going to protect me, then I would have to stop asking for permission to protect myself. The next morning, I printed a sign in bold black letters. "Do not leave items on this property." I didn't think it would fix everything. I didn't even think it would stop her. But it was a start. A small declaration that I wasn't going to let the rules bend just because Vera didn't like being told no. I laminated the sign and nailed it to the fence post closest to our front walkway, where she always liked to pass through. I didn't ask Darian for help this time. He was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, I wasn't waiting on anyone's approval anymore. By mid-morning, the wind had settled down, and the sky was that soft, sleepy kind of blue that only early spring brought in Evanston. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on the porch, watching. Nothing happened. That first day was quiet, almost too quiet, but by the second morning, there it was, A small cardboard box sitting just inside the property line. No name, no note, just there. I stared at it for a minute before walking out barefoot to check. Inside were a few paperback novels, old and sun-faded, romance titles, dog-eared corners. It wasn't trash, but it wasn't a gift either. I picked it up, carried it to the garage, and set it near the bin. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of reacting. The next day, it was a bag of fabric scraps, the kind Vera used for her crafting, sewing, holiday projects she posted on Facebook like she was auditioning for some kind of local Martha Stewart award. I didn't touch it right away. I waited until after lunch. Darian saw it and asked, "You think she left that?" I didn't even look up from the cutting board. Who else would? He exhaled through his nose and said nothing. By the end of the week, a small potted plant had joined the collection, an ivy already browning at the tips, like it had been neglected and then suddenly made presentable, probably from Vera's back deck. I didn't move it this time. I left it sitting there, next to the sign. I wanted her to see her own passive aggression reflect back at her. Each morning after that, as I left for work, I noticed the blinds in her front window twitch just slightly. She watched, not always obviously, but I could feel it. Then came the humming. It started softly, barely noticeable. I was watering the side garden one afternoon, pulling up the winter weeds, when I heard her in her front yard. Humming, that same syrupy tune she always used when she wanted to seem light-hearted and innocent. It grated. She moved closer, right to the property line, watering the hedge that divided our yards. "Lovely weather," she chirped, not looking at me. "Perfect day for peace, don't you think?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I wasn't going to waste them. The sign by then had become a silent war, not just between us, but for everyone else to see. Neighbors started noticing. They'd glance, whisper, keep walking. Nobody asked questions, but I saw the looks. Still, I stood my ground. That evening, after dinner and dishes, I sat on the kitchen floor. I don't know why. I had taken out the trash, wiped down the counters, folded laundry, and somehow I ended up there, leaning against the dishwasher, staring into space. My phone buzzed beside me. A text from a number I didn't recognize at first. It read, "I know you didn't do anything wrong. I see everything. I'm sorry I haven't said anything until now." My breath caught in my throat. I looked again at the contact. Lyra, Vera's daughter, my niece. I stared at the message for a long time, not just reading it, absorbing it. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest, it was real. In a family where silence had been weaponized, where I'd been made invisible through politeness, this felt like oxygen. I typed back slowly. "Thank you." She responded with one more message. I wanted to say it earlier, but Mom checks my phone sometimes. I didn't reply after that. I didn't want to put her in any more trouble, but I held that moment tightly. That text, those words, they didn't erase everything, but they punctured the fog. Someone saw me, not just through offense, not through gossip or assumption, but clearly. For the first time in weeks, I let the tears come. Quiet, not from despair, but release. I wasn't alone, I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't the only one watching. I sat there until the kitchen light started to feel too bright. Then I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and stepped outside for some air. The ivy was still there, wilted now. The sign stood tall. I looked toward Vera's front window. The blinds shifted again. Let her look. You can't control people's lives, but you can damn well decide where they leave their trash. When you stop playing their game, they change the rules. Vera was about to play dirty. It started quietly. Most things with her did. A shift in the air, a slight turn of tone, a look that lingered a second too long. Then came the next escalation, one I didn't see until the morning I stepped outside to water the garden and noticed something that didn't belong. It had rained the night before, so the ground was still damp, the grass a little flattened in some spots. That's when I saw it. A hose, long and pale green, coiled like a lazy serpent, sneaking through the lowest gap near the corner fence post. It ran from Vera's spigot, around the hedges, and into my yard. Attached at the end was a cheap black irrigation pipe, zip-tied, stretched across my flower beds like it had every right to be there. At first, I thought it might have blown there, but the zip ties, the tidy loop to avoid the stones I'd placed just last week? No, this was no accident. It was intentional, calculated. Vera had installed an extension line to water her hedge from inside my yard. I knelt beside it, inspecting the angle and how carefully it had been tucked under the fence slats. There was no mistake. She had crossed the property line, again, but this time it wasn't with words or gossip. It was physical, tangible. I stood up and went back inside, took photos from my upstairs window to get a full view of the setup, then walked out again with a measuring tape, documenting how far onto our land the pipe ran. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I was going to handle it the way she hated most, with paperwork and proof. That afternoon, while Darian was still at work, I called my mother. I didn't want to. But part of me was still hoping someone in my bloodline might see what I was dealing with, that someone would say, "You're right to stand up for yourself." She answered on the third ring. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, always warm, always careful. "Hi, Mom," I replied, sitting on the back steps. "Can I ask you something and you just listen first?" "Of course." I told her about the pipe, the invasion, the silence from everyone else. I told her how it felt like Vera was testing me, looking for soft spots to keep digging into. She was quiet for a beat too long. Then came her response. "You're the youngest. You've always been good at smoothing things over. Don't let this become bigger than it needs to be." There it was. Not, "That's outrageous." Not, "She had no right." Just, "Don't rock the boat. Stay agreeable. Make peace." I clenched my jaw and nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Thanks for listening," I said quickly, then hung up before the ache in my chest could climb up to my throat. For the next 2 hours, I sat with that ache. Then I stood up and decided that if no one else was going to put a stop to this, I would. I drafted an email to the HOA. I attached the photos, included timestamp metadata, noted the zip-tied attachments, and politely but firmly stated, "This is an unauthorized use of our private property. If the pipe is not removed by end of business Friday, I will escalate this to city code enforcement." I reread it twice before hitting send. No emotion, just facts. By the following morning, there was no reply from the HOA yet. But Vera had noticed. She came out just as I was checking the mailbox. She didn't greet me, didn't even pretend to be civil. Instead, later that afternoon, I received a text from her. A rare event these days. "Wow, over a little water. You're really making this personal." I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking the phone and placing it face down on the counter. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I called a landscaping contractor. I explained the situation and paid the service fee up front. I asked for discretion, and they delivered. The next morning, 2 men arrived just after sunrise. They removed the pipe quietly, coiled it neatly, and packed it into a plain cardboard box. Inside the same box, I placed a photocopy of our property deed, clearly highlighting the boundary lines. On top, I added a note in clean block letters. "Please respect our property. Stay on your side. No signature, no threats, just truth." By mid-afternoon, the box sat on her porch. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't need a scene. I watched from the kitchen window, my fingers wrapped loosely around a mug of chamomile tea. Vera stepped outside, still in her house slippers, spotted the box, and picked it up. She paused as she opened it, then pulled back the flaps and saw the pipe, coiled like a sleeping snake inside. Her mouth tensed. She looked around quickly, trying to determine who had seen. Then she disappeared back inside. That was the moment I felt it. Not victory. Not triumph. Control. For the first time in this whole mess, I hadn't reacted. I hadn't defended. I had enforced. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, reading quietly. I didn't hear from her. No texts, no calls. But I did notice the blinds stayed shut. And that evening, Darian came home, saw the box was gone, and asked casually, "Did she finally take it down?" I nodded once. "Good," he said. Maybe now things will calm down. I didn't have the heart to tell him she hadn't calmed. She'd just changed tactics. The kind of people like Vera, they don't back off. They redirect. They regroup. But I was ready for it, because now I wasn't playing defense, now I was drawing the lines. I didn't know she'd been digging for my weaknesses too, but she had, and she was ready to strike. It was a Friday afternoon when I heard it. I was sitting in my car, parked outside the hardware store on Central, scrolling through my grocery list, when I spotted two familiar figures near the plant section, Vera and her neighbor friend Rhonda. They didn't see me at first. I wouldn't have paid them much attention except I heard my name, not shouted, just threaded through like gossip often is. "We almost lost the house once," Vera was saying, her hand resting on a potted fern. "But Paul and I pushed through. No one helped us. It was just us pulling ourselves out." Rhonda clucked her tongue, impressed. "You're strong, girl." I sat completely still, my keys in my hand, but my fingers no longer moving. The sun poured through the windshield, but I felt cold. Not helped us. I remembered the check, the $5,000 I'd scraped together years ago when Vera and my brother were about to default on their mortgage. When she sat across from me at Henrietta's kitchen table, with eyes wide and voice trembling. "I hate to ask," she said, "but if we lose the house, I don't know what's going to happen to Lyra." I remembered how Darian and I had debated that night. It wasn't the best time for us financially either, but we did it. I handed over that check with a note that said, "Just for now." And now she stood there like she'd pulled herself up from the mud alone. That evening, after I got home and put away the groceries, I went straight to the filing cabinet in our bedroom. I rifled through tax returns, property records, even old birthday cards until I found it, tucked in the back, behind a manila envelope of donation receipts. A scanned image of the cashier's check, my signature at the bottom, my handwriting on the memo line, "For mortgage assistance." Right underneath it, an email chain between Vera, Darian, and myself confirming that the money would be applied to their payment. Except the final legal agreement had gone through under Darian's name, since he already had a banking relationship with them. No mention of me in the official paperwork, just Darian, erased, again. I sat on the bed, that bitter, familiar sting rising in my chest. This wasn't just about a pipe or a fence anymore. This was a pattern, a history of making me invisible in every way that mattered. Contributions, overlooked. Presence, minimized. Voice, muted unless it served someone else's comfort. So I did what I should have done years ago. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and made a list. Water pipe trespassing incident, photos taken, HOA alerted trash bags and gifts left on property, documented social media post inciting neighborhood shame, screenshot unauthorized patio construction behind Vera's house, observed by 3 neighbors, $5,000 payment, documented via check and emails. By the end of the night, I had a folder thicker than a summer thriller novel. The next morning, I submitted everything to the Evanston HOA's violation board and attached a formal complaint to the Department of Buildings. Every document, time-stamped, every photo, labeled. I even added a typed summary explaining each violation, not emotional, not accusatory, just factual. I didn't tell Darian, not yet. 3 days passed. Then Tuesday morning, Vera received the letter. I was sipping my tea at the window again when I saw the certified envelope delivered by the mail carrier. I could tell by the green sticker on the corner. She opened the door wearing a face mask and slippers, took the envelope, and scanned the front before stepping back inside without a word. That afternoon, a group text went out to the extended family. From Vera. "I just got hit with a formal complaint about my patio. Someone obviously has too much time on their hands, but don't worry, we'll handle it. Unlike others, we don't need to tear down our neighbors to feel tall." Henrietta replied with a sad face emoji. Mindy responded with, "Ugh, some people." I didn't engage, not there. I was saving my voice for when it counted. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 6:00 p.m. Vera showed up late, wearing a lemon-yellow blouse and an expression that screamed innocence. She sat near the back, whispered with someone I didn't recognize, and avoided my eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up calmly. I wore black slacks, a navy blouse, and flats, not because I wanted to look somber, but because I was done dressing for their comfort. I handed out folders to each board member, already printed and bound. I spoke clearly, slowly. I laid out the facts without once raising my voice. When I finished, one of the board members, Jim, I think his name was, looked up and asked, "Do you have any evidence of ongoing conflict?" I opened my folder, slid out the email chain with Vera calling me emotionally unstable, and passed it across the table. He read it, sighed, and nodded. Vera stood next. She tried to smile, tried to play it off, but her voice cracked once, twice. She blamed a misunderstanding, said the pipe was old and left behind from a prior contractor, claimed the patio didn't violate any codes. That's when Marcy, another neighbor, spoke up from the second row. "I remember when they built it." My husband told her it was past code limits. Silence. Vera's face went stiff, her hands balled into fists at her side. Someone whispered, "I didn't know she'd been doing all that." It rippled across the room, a slow shift. Not everyone turned on her, but enough did. After the meeting, no one approached Vera, but 3 neighbors came up to me. "I'm sorry," one said. "I should have asked for your side sooner." That evening, I walked home alone. Darian had a work dinner, and honestly, I was grateful for the quiet. As I turned onto our block, the porch light was already on. The sign was still there, so was the fence. And finally, so was I. Present, visible. But no confession hits harder than the one that comes from the mouth of someone who once stayed silent. "She's lying!" Vera screamed, just as her daughter stood up and told the truth. The room had fallen into a tense hush the moment Vera raised her voice. The HOA hearing had been civil until now. A little stiff, sure, but quiet. And then Vera, flustered and sweating under the fluorescent lights, tried to spin the whole thing into a sob story. "She's lying! She's always been jealous of this house," she said, pointing in my direction, like I'd barged in and stolen something from her life. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. But I saw them shifting in their chairs. Board members, neighbors, 2 folks from across the street who always smiled politely but never said much. I could feel their discomfort. Not because of what was being said, but because something about it wasn't landing the way it used to. And that's when it happened. Lyra stood up. She'd been sitting alone in the back row, headphones around her neck, long brown hair tucked behind her ears. She hadn't said a word since they walked in. Vera hadn't even introduced her. Probably didn't want her there in the first place, but Lyra had insisted on coming. I knew because she texted me the night before. "Can I come tomorrow? I just want to hear what's said." Now here she was, 15 and shaking slightly, but standing straight. "Mom," she said, her voice steady, "you made her clean our floors when she lived with us. You never thanked her. You told me she was just lucky to be taken in." Gasps echoed around the room. Henrietta closed her eyes, slowly, like she'd been bracing for impact. Darian looked down at his shoes. Vera's face froze. It was the first time in my life I saw her caught off guard with no line to fall back on. Her jaw tightened and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lyra sat down quietly. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The truth didn't need amplification. It stood on its own. I calmly opened the folder I had brought, pulled out the laminated fence permit, the printed property deed, the annotated photos of the patio construction extending over the line. I handed them to the HOA chair. "This isn't revenge," I said, my voice calm but clear. "It's boundary." The chair, a woman named Shelley who lived 3 houses down, looked through the papers, then nodded. "Thank you, Estelle." There was a pause in the room that felt almost sacred. Then, Shelley turned to Vera. "Mrs. Adeline, we're issuing a citation. You'll be required to remove the unpermitted patio structures within 30 days and cease all use of neighboring land for personal property use. Should further violations occur, fines will be imposed." Vera didn't protest. She didn't have it in her. She sat, small and still. Not the woman who had commanded barbecues and holiday parties and Sunday potlucks. She looked reduced. Not humiliated, not broken, just stripped of the illusion. People started to shuffle in their chairs. The formalities wrapped up, adjourned. People began rising, but they didn't go to her. They came to me. Not all, not even most, but enough. I didn't know the whole story, one woman said softly. I'm sorry for judging so quickly. I wish I'd asked your side sooner, another man added. I nodded politely, not out of pride, but because anything more would have made me cry. Darian met me outside. He looked nervous. You all right? He asked. Better than I thought I'd be. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but closed it again. At home, I changed into jeans and a sweatshirt. Something simple. Something solid. Then I grabbed the small plaque I had custom ordered 2 weeks ago, the one I had debated hanging, then hidden under the laundry basket out of doubt. I walked outside to the fence. It was late afternoon, the sun slipping lower but still warm. I drilled the screws in slowly, carefully, letting the sound echo. Private property. Do not enter. Respect is not optional. When I stepped back, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt done. Darian stood on the porch behind me, arms crossed. He didn't speak. I didn't look back. That night I slept for 7 uninterrupted hours, the first time in months. The next morning, I took my coffee outside. The lavender bush near the corner was beginning to bloom, just barely. As I crouched to trim one of the lower stems, I saw something glinting underneath. It looked like a plastic sleeve, half buried in the mulch. I dug gently, brushing aside the dirt and broken leaves, until I pulled it free. It was an envelope, worn, weathered, but intact. It had my name written on it, in my father's handwriting. And under the lavender bush beside my fence, I found the letter that would heal what even justice couldn't touch. It was sealed in plastic, weather-worn, hidden in the roots. The last words from the man who taught me that silence doesn't always mean safety. I brought the letter inside with trembling hands. It was early morning still, the sky just beginning to shift from gray to gold, and the neighborhood hadn't woken up yet. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in my robe, the envelope resting beside my tea. For a long time I didn't open it. I just looked at it, traced the edges of his handwriting with my thumb. Dad had passed nearly 6 years ago. The cancer had come fast, taken everything slow. I'd been there, holding his hand at the end, listening to his breath rattle while everyone else stayed in the hallway. He was the only person who had ever seen me whole, never a burden, never too much. I finally broke the seal and slid the paper out. His handwriting was crooked, rushed, but still unmistakably his. There were watermarks, ink bled at the edges, but I could read every word. You were always strong. Don't let their noise drown your truth. If the world turns its back, build a fence, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself safe. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, and then I cried. Not the gutted sobs of despair, but the quiet tears that come with relief. Validation. Release, the kind that cleans out corners of the soul you forgot were dusty. When I finished the tea and wiped my face, the house was still quiet. Darian was out for his morning run. I folded the letter gently, placed it in a fresh envelope, and tucked it into the drawer near the back door. Somewhere safe, somewhere it could stay. Later that week, I trimmed the lavender bush down to the base. It had grown unruly with spring rains, and its new growth was pushing out in strange directions. I cleared the bed, turned the soil, and planted 3 fresh seedlings I picked up from the farmer's market. Lavender again, but a different variety. Smaller blooms, but richer color. I wanted something new that still honored what had been. Around the neighborhood, the silence from Vera was louder than ever. She didn't show up to the next HOA meeting. Her car was missing from the driveway more often. I heard through a neighbor that she'd started parking down the block to avoid walking past our house. One day, I spotted her returning from the market. She saw me from across the street and looked away so fast I thought she might trip on the curb. She never apologized, not in words, but sometimes silence can tell you everything you need to know, when it finally comes from someone who used to weaponize it. Her illegal patio was gone within the 30-day deadline. Quietly. No excuses. Just gone. I never saw the workers come. But one morning, it wasn't there anymore. Henrietta mailed a card about a week later. Not a call, not a knock, just a pale blue envelope in the box. Thank you for being patient with us all. No signature, just that. Darian came home from work the following Friday evening. He walked into the kitchen, tossed his keys into the bowl by the fridge, and leaned against the counter. I should have said something sooner, he said. I looked at him. So should I. He didn't push the conversation further, and that was fine. Some things didn't need dissecting anymore. Lyra started coming over on weekends. The first time, she just showed up with a bag of flour and a recipe printout from Pinterest. I want to learn how to make scones, she said, like nothing had ever happened. We baked. We made a mess. We laughed. She stayed until evening, then helped clean up without being asked. Before she left, she hugged me tight. I'm sorry it took me so long, she whispered. You came when it mattered, I replied. The following week, she returned with chocolate chips and almond extract. We're trying biscotti next, she said with a grin. I didn't have a speech prepared. I didn't pretend this was a fairy tale reconciliation. It wasn't. It was real and slow and honest. There was no grand reunion with the rest of the family, no dramatic breakthroughs, and I didn't need one. I had peace. I had boundaries. And most importantly, I had myself. One afternoon, while sweeping the front porch, I noticed a couple walking their dog paws near the fence. They were looking at the small metal plaque I'd had installed after the hearing. Private property. Do not enter respect is not optional. The man nodded toward the sign. That's the kind of reminder some folks need around here. I smiled and waved politely. After they left, I walked the perimeter of the fence, checking for wear, for loose boards, for signs of anything needing repair. It was solid. It stood tall, not just because of the lumber or nails, but because of what it meant. I had built it, yes, but it wasn't meant to divide. It was meant to define, to remind me where I ended and where someone else began. And that mattered more than any apology ever could. Sometimes, the hardest boundaries to draw are with the people who say they love us the most. But protecting your peace doesn't make you the villain. It makes you brave. What would you have done if your own family refused to respect your space? Let me know in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next family story. You're not alone in this. We all have fences to build.